Ouais, merci.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone, and welcome in our Scaling Impact Investment to Empower Communities session. I'll be serving as moderator for this session with a distinguished set of panelists. Here we have Liz from the Jacobs Foundation, Cote d'Ivoire. We have Edgar Antonio from ILO West Africa. We got Rachel from CARE US and Patrick Helmer from iGravity. So the discussion is envisioned through this session is because achieving impact takes long-term commitment, smart and steady funding, and relevant leadership. And as you know, global focus on need for more social justice opens opportunity and opportunities to build, if not to reinforce, the bridge between business investment and social impact or development impact investment. So once again, it's about building bridges between for-profit investment and for social investment. And that being said, the session that we're going to have is about questioning the model of social development, the founding model of community-driven development that we have been implementing so far, given the stakeholders that are engaged or that are likely to be, but also given the necessity to kind of innovatively reach the next level to meet the needs of increased and steady funding for an amplified impact at the disruptions that we are facing now, such as, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic. So our session is going to go according to the following flow. We will have a run of 4 short PowerPoint presentations, but each of the speakers here, including myself. And all these presentations will be guided by one principal question that they'll try to unpack for a better comprehension. And this presentation will be followed by an interactive part of our session made of question and answers from the audience, but also some polling exercises that we have prepared so that we can remain active and contribute to the success of the session. So having said that, let me start with the presentation by myself, by kind of sharing with you what is the snapshot of the current community-driven development funding landscape. First of all, let us look at the stakeholders that are engaged so far. If you look at the landscape, you can see that all the cocoa value chain companies are engaged in funding the community-driven development activities. It can be cocoa suppliers, it can be processors or chocolate makers, but it can also be retailers. So it starts from the upstream of the value chain and goes until the downstream of the value chain. But in this funding venture, you also have governments and development donors, the institutional ones, that are also active in some of the programs. And last but not the least, the communities themselves contribute to the funding of the activities alongside with private donors. So how do these stakeholders work? How do they work together? The classic model is through supporting the sustainability program. So typically you will have a supporting cocoa and chocolate company initiating a program as part of a cooperative in a given community and funding the sustainability initiatives, but also getting funding for its customer. If it is a supplier that will purchase cocoa beans and sell them to a processor or a brand, you will also have through this channel, this commercial relationship, the brand or the processor will also contribute to fund the community development activities that are led in the field. And after that, you also have the scenario of leveraging existing opportunities. The classic case is, for example, when you have a community action plan that is developed. This is something that is very comprehensive and that may have things that are out of scope for the cocoa and chocolate company. So you may have the connection of this community action plan with the government planning system, and then the government taking over to fund some critical investment that are out of scope for a typical cocoa and chocolate company. And the last type of working relationship that we can see is that some of the time, sometimes the cocoa and chocolate company work to connect their program to sustainable development goals related funding trends, so that they can attract also this funding coming from the institutional donors and all those that are interested in advancing the sustainable development goal. This is how it has been working so far. But the question is about the ability of the efforts deployed so far to meet the need for a scaled impact, especially in these disruptive times. The response to this question is obviously no. And since the response is no, it is therefore necessary to explore new thinking, new ways of envisioning the funding model for community development, for community-driven development, and for to advance social impact in the field as part of the sustainability initiative. So new thinking, new opportunities, and that goes with thinking about also engaging new stakeholders that have been kind of left a part of that so far, or not enough mobilized in this endeavor. And all this is necessary to kind of boost the founding model of social development, the founding model of community-driven development. So these are, in short words, the way things have been so far. And building from that, we thought that it was important to explore what it takes to reach the next level. So I'm about to introduce our first speaker. He works at the intersection of finance and global development, focusing on innovative solutions and partnerships that create opportunities for underprivileged people and protect our planet. He has also worked as head of business development at Blue Orchard, leading the sales strategy across multiple markets and developing new partnerships and structures. He has also been head of philanthropy services and responsible investment at Credit Suisse, the Switzerland bank, advising clients on investment solutions, leading the bank's effort in creating novel partnerships and products in areas like microfinance, education, agriculture, and conservation finance. And even before that, he has also worked for many years in Mozambique, Tanzania, and Madagascar, so in the southern part of our continent, Africa, first managing the private sector development portfolio of SECO, the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, and later establishing and managing microfinance banks on behalf of public and private investors. So there is still this relationship between public and private. He holds a master's degree in international affairs from the University of St. Gallen and a master's degree on developing countries from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, Zurich. He is the founder and CEO of iGravity. Let us welcome Patrick Almer as our first speaker. Patrick, you have the floor to answer to that basic question. How can the stakeholders that I've mentioned so far, including new ones if necessary, work differently? And what is the concept of social development or social impact investment about? So Patrick, you have the floor.
Thanks, Yusuf. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, so I just realized that my bio is way too long, so I will make sure the next time that you get a shorter one, Yusuf. So good afternoon, hello everybody, bonjour à tout le monde, c'est un plaisir d'être avec vous. Maybe we can start with the next slide. And you know, we all know that more capital is needed to realize the sustainable development goals and obviously address the social problems. Now, everybody is looking at the private sector and especially at the financial sector to close this gap, because that's where the big money is. In the next couple of minutes, I will speak to you about two things. First, who are these investors and how do they make investment decisions? And second, how can we actually mobilize some of this financing by applying innovative finance mechanisms? Let me start by saying that there is not one homogeneous block of investors. Investors, you know, could be pension funds, could be banks, could be charitable foundations, could be insurance companies, could be wealthy individuals, but also normal people, retail clients. And they all have slightly different preferences and objectives, which we need to take into consideration when we look at the private or at the financial sector. What is clear is that all of them take or base their investment decisions based on three factors. First, they look at the expected return of a financial investment. Second, they look at the risk, you know, is there a risk to lose actually my money, the capital? And third, the liquidity. Is my investment something I can exit tomorrow again, or will I be stuck with my investment over the next 10 years? So these are three key considerations. Now, there are also, and the good news is there is an increasing number of investors which also include extra financial considerations in their decision making. On this chart, as we move from the left towards the right, you see, you know, the left side is the mainstream finance. They care only or mostly about financial return. And on the right-hand side, we have the philanthropy side. This is the charitable giving, the grant side. So as we move from the left to the right-hand side, investors start to include additional consideration beyond the risk and return, starting with negative screening, so avoiding specific sectors, to integration of ESG factors, so environmental, social, and governance criteria, to team-based investments, up to what we call impact investments, which is probably the relevant discussion point for today, which makes up about $800 billion market. Now, and we can move to the next slide, Yusuf, please. How can we actually mobilize some of this financing from the financial sector? How can we actually apply some of this capital to development cooperation? And also, how can we make some of this funding, some of this capital applied more effectively? That's where innovative finance comes into play. There is a diverse toolkit of financial mechanisms which can help mobilize this additional financing. Now, it's nothing new per se. It's the novelty, I would say, is more applying some of this financial mechanism to the development sector. Here, it gets very technical, and I don't think we need to dig into the details, just that there are different ways of attracting capital from investors. Could be financial products. These are funds, for example, impact investment funds working with loans and equity investments. You can use risk-sharing mechanisms like guarantees. Today, there's a strong emphasis on result-based financing, so not anymore paying for the inputs, but more based on actual results. Technology is playing an increasing important role, whether it's using the use of blockchain or crowdfunding platform, up to private sector contribution and debt management. Now, let me give you two concrete examples on how that works. We can go to the next slide. So the first example is about a development impact bond, and the second one will be a blended impact investment fund. Development impact bond, or DIPS or SIPs, social impact bond, have been launched for the first time in 2010 in the UK with the intention of making social interventions more effective and mobilize upfront financing from impact investors. How does it work? In a development impact bond or an impact bond structure, there is always an upfront investor which is putting money on the table to finance a social intervention in a specific geography to address a specific challenge. So it could be in the health sector, could be education. As part of the structure, there is a donor so-called outcome funder that commits to pay back the initial investors a few years down the line, but only if certain outcomes that have been agreed are being met. And as part of this, there is obviously an auditor and evaluator which makes sure that these KPIs are effectively met. What is interesting here or important is that if the intervention fails, so if the social intervention fails, the investor is losing all or part of his investments. So the returns are 100% attached to the level of outcomes achieved. And one of the best known examples is the Educate Girl Development Impact Bond, which has been launched in India in 2015 with an upfront investment from the UBS Optimus Foundation. The foundation will receive its payout, including a financial return, only if the selected service provider, which is a local NGO called Educate Girl, could increase enrollment and learning achievement for a group of about 15,000 children in a specific district in India. So the repayment metrics were split in this case between outputs and outcomes, looking at enrollment targets of girls and learning outcomes. There is a foundation from the UK, the Children's Investment Fund, which commits to repay back the initial investor if successful. And this has been a specific example where this financial mechanism has been successful. UBS has been paid back by CIF, has made a financial return as well. And the service provider, the NGO, has also participated in some of this upside. We can go to the last slide. So this is my last example, which is about an impact investment fund. In this specific case, it's a fund called the REFA, which is an education finance facility for Africa, managed by Blue Orchard, where I was working previously. And this fund provides financing to financial institutions in sub-Saharan Africa with the goal to improve access to quality education and affordable education. How does it work? The fund is mobilizing money from investors, from private investors and from development actors to finance private affordable schools, families for school fees, and small and medium-sized enterprises in education, not directly, but working through local banks and local microfinance institutions. What is important to know that the fund is providing loans and charging an interest rate to the borrower, which have to repay this capital. This obviously implies there is an economic activity behind that generates cash flows. And my last point, that this fund has been initiated by the German government with putting some money into this structure, but with a clear intention to mobilize a much larger amount from private investor. And how can they do that? Is by taking more risk. So if some of the loans will default or not being paid back, the German government will lose money in the first place, and private investors like foundation or family offices will have a cushion to protect them from potential losses. This will give them comfort to invest in a fund that is deploying capital to sub-Saharan Africa, where many of them wouldn't feel comfortable otherwise. I stop here and back to you, Yusuf.
Yusuf, you're still on mute.
Is it okay? Okay, thank you, Patrick. I was saying, as I say, that would generate questions from our audience, including from myself also. So be ready for that when we reach the Q&A session. So the following question that we want to address is, based on what Patrick has just explained, how can a classic development donor can use this type of things, and what is the kind of journey that it takes to use this kind of new model of funding the social impact that we are seeking? And to answer to that question, we'll be hosting someone who works on the intersection between financial inclusion and the realization of fundamental principles and rights at work. He supports the implementation of the ILO Accel Africa project, aiming at the elimination of child labor in global supply chains in Africa, including in cocoa then. And he has a field experience developing innovative financial services for smallholder farmers and related value chain actors. He has also supported the ILO Impact Insurance Facility, designing holistic risk management solutions for cocoa farmers in Cote d'Ivoire. So it is here at the core of what we need. How can we make finance helpful for the most vulnerable people? He has also worked with microfinance institutions in Ghana and Mozambique, developing alternative distribution models to serve low-income market and rural populations. And from an academic perspective, he holds a master's degree in rural development from southern countries and an engineer diploma in agriculture. Thank you, dear fellow, from both Montpellier Suppg in France. Edgar Antonio is the Social Finance Officer, ILO Regional Office for Africa, and we are delighted to let you the floor to answer to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf, and hello, everybody. And please, let's go to the second slide. So before starting, I would like also to raise your attention in the work of the ILO in this specific, space, which is like the financial sector. So at the ILO, we have a specific program, which is a social finance that aims to enable the financial sector to contribute to the decent work agenda. This means the promotion of the realization of rights at work, like the elimination of child labor. The ILO supports by building capacities of policymakers and investors in ways they can integrate and include social outcomes in their investments. So we work with financial institutions, insurance companies, and also impact investment organizations. Please, next. So in the field, the ILO is implementing a Dutch-funded project named Axel Africa, which aims at the elimination of child labor in global supply chains. The project works in Cote d'Ivoire in the cocoa supply chain, addressing the root causes of child labor. So in our efforts to support the implementation of the National Action Plan, we are exploring innovative financing mechanisms to attract additional funding, to attract additional capital, and also to identify new actors who would join the efforts of the government, but also of the industry in addressing child labor in the cocoa supply chain. This innovative financing mechanism that we are exploring is the impact bond that was now presented by Patrick in his previous slides. Please, next. So even if we consider that impact bonds can have a huge potential in attracting additional funding and new actors, we consider that it was critical to first assess the feasibility of such tool in this specific context, which is child labor in Cote d'Ivoire, as there is any impact bond at the moment in Africa addressing child labor issues. So the feasibility study, which is being conducted by iGravity, and we're working together with this with Patrick and his team, started by understanding the root causes of child labor, and also identifying all the different actors that are implementing interventions in the field. So this work was consolidated in this first product, which is the status quo document. Second, after having this deep understanding of the complex situation in Cote d'Ivoire, we reviewed the long list of intervention models identified in the country, but also in other countries in the globe, and also in other supply chains. The review of these models mainly focused in their evidence-based for reduction of child labor. And out of this long list of models that we identified, we came up with a short list of potential intervention models. These models, again, looked at their evidence base for reduction of child labor. As you may imagine, we have found that there is low evidence in the attributions that we can give to one model to the reduction in child labor. So this new assessment or deep assessment in the short list of intervention models continued the assessment in terms of their evidence-based, but also in the fitness of the model with the development impact bond, which has a specific characteristics, which are that interventions need to be, I mean, we should measure the impact of the interventions in reduction of child labor. This is one. We should be able to attribute the impact to such intervention models. And also in the time frame they can be implemented, as we have seen that impact bonds are mainly implemented in a time frame of 3 to 4 years. So the impact must be demonstrated in the field in less of 5 years, let's say. So this short list of potential models were also assessed, including indicators in their alignment with the national priorities, and also keeping in mind a risk perspective of their intervention in the field. To complete this assessment, we are now currently conducting, or we will be planning to conduct field visits to collect specific data in the field, but also to identify the right service providers who can implement such models in this specific context. For that, we are looking at providers who have a performance culture and who are able to provide the impact that must be measured in order to pay for the results. At the end of the whole process, we are looking at the validation workshop, which we are going to invite main stakeholders, including the government, the industry, and others, to decide and validate the specific intervention model, which will be pre-identified for this specific financing mechanism. Please, next. So to say our role in the in this feasibility study was mainly to provide expertise in child labor, meaning that a huge focus was given to the evidence base. So the ILO provides this specific expertise in assessing the models and their impacts, but also we ensured the alignment of the models assessed to the national priorities, and also to ensure that those models can be absorbed in the medium to long term by the national interventions, and hence ensuring the sustainability. The ILO also opened its network to identify new private investors and outcome funders who have already in mind, or who have the agenda to put investments with specific objectives like the reduction of child labor. So our main role was now to, as I said at the very beginning, to attract additional funding and to identify new actors who could join the efforts that the government and the industry is playing in Côte d'Ivoire in this specific cocoa supply chain. I think I will stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Edgar. So one thing is to have a new tool, a new approach, but another is to have it deeply rooted in the reality, to better understand the reality that it pretends to change thanks to the funding that we want to attract. This is how I can link the two interventions that you guys have shared so far. Now, moving forward on our journey for innovatively attracting funding for social impact, I want to call upon someone that will answer to the question, why and how can private investors make a difference in supporting social development or social impact? Because so far we have been talking about institutions, foundations, etc., but it seems that there's also a potential to attract individual funding capabilities from some person that have available money. So I'm calling upon someone who has 15 years of experience at the intersection of private philanthropy and social impact, connecting donors to programs and opportunities that align with the change they want to see in the world. So she is someone who has a strong experience in fundraising for organizations such as Public Citizen American University and the American Kidney Fund. And she has also a strong background in gender equity and diversity as a trainer for her organization. And she has also already been working for the US Peace Corps and the World Wildlife Fund. And she holds a Bachelor of Arts in English from the George Mason University and a Master of Arts in International Communication from American University School of International Service. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Rachel Mlinarczyk. She is the Senior Director of Development for CARE USA. Rachel, you have the floor.
Oh, merci beaucoup, Youssef. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. As Youssef said, I'm here today to talk with you about individuals and how and why they might make investments in community development, social impact. But actually, Youssef, right before I do that, I also wanted to just express support for the previous panelists and what they were talking about, both Edgar and Patrick, because CARE, where I work, has a lot of enthusiasm for the impact investment approach. And it represents, I think, exactly what you're talking about with this panel, which is how important it is to be opening up these lines that we see between individual supporters or the finance industry and the social impact and development sector. CARE saw that importance, and we actually do have an impact development fund that we established and announced, I think, at the World Economic Forum a couple of years ago, maybe 2017, called CARE Enterprises, Inc. And CARE felt so strongly about the importance of what Edgar and Patrick were talking about and the possibilities for it that they, CARE actually committed 10 million in seed funding, including like 5 million in first loss capital. So that's just a side note to say that it really does take all of these different parts, and that large organizations like CARE, who are working on global poverty and have been for 75 years, absolutely see that and support it and are ready to collaborate in that space. So now we can go on and talk about, and it's important, I mentioned that because the people who might be the individual investor for an impact fund that both really, I think, more what Patrick was talking about as an example, are sometimes one and the same. They're sometimes the people that I'm about to talk about right now. So if we can go to the next slide. So why would an individual contribute to community development in a place, either in their own community or in the cases that we're talking about for the people I work with, very far away from them in another country? And the answer to that question is that they are personally interested in impacting the lives of someone else who they feel it's only right to help. So if you ask individual donors that I work with why they decide to give to CARE or why they're contributing to a specific community development project, whether that's within the cocoa sector or elsewhere, they want to, it's not necessarily about the sector, it's simply, and they say this across the board, they would say, well, I have a lot and it's not necessarily because I've done anything to deserve it, and I want to enact some sort of justice. I don't think that's fair, and I want to help people who weren't born in this place where I have so much. And I just think that that's the right thing to do. And I want to be sure that I'm having that effect. I want to do the right thing. So it's a very simple desire to help others. It really, truly, genuinely is. For most of the people I work with, they want to see an outcome, particularly around education or around economic development and income generation, or around the right to health or the right to have enough to eat and hunger. Very, very basic concepts that most people do understand and we all deserve as a right. So, and they also want to see a lot of what we're hearing about today, which are sustainable interventions that can move families and communities or, you know, areas of the world towards prosperity and health in a way that is going to continue forward without their additional and continuing investment. So that's sort of the motivation of why would a person be giving to this sort of work. And then I also want to talk about how, like, what does that look like? How can those donations help? and what it looks like for, I would say, the types of partnerships we see with the private sector. At CARE, when we see a project where we have an institutional funder or a private sector funder, the role that an individual person's donation plays is usually to maybe expand the project to reach more people, or to fund additional interventions that maybe weren't conceived of at the start of the project, or just weren't part of the particular focus of this project, but that perhaps the community itself has said would be beneficial. So, and of course, it's possible when you're working with individuals to engage a lot of new audiences, which can then leverage additional funding, especially if there's a cause marketing aspect or some kind of match campaign. And and I did want to just give a sense of the size of the investments of the people that I've personally and my colleagues and I work with, and that's anywhere from $25,000 US to, I think one of the largest individual grants, and this is over 2 or 3 years, is about $7 million that one of our supporters does. So it really does. It's very hard if you wanted to say, well, what's the ROI? How would I say exactly how it would benefit us to work with an individual donor? Because these are individual people, that's hard to say. But I hope these numbers can show the possibility there. So next, I was going to talk about how is it that CARE or large charities find these individual donors, and how do we show them and inspire them to invest specifically, not just with a charity, but in a specific project, say, for example, something in the cocoa sector. And there are many ways we do that. One of them is something that at CARE we call CARE Journeys. It's donor travel. And we've been doing this informally for many years at CARE, but we just started a more formal program over the last 3 years, where we actually have 4 trips a year. We check with each of our offices around the world to see who's ready and who could accept a guest, and who has programming that's at such a stage that it would be safe, obviously, for everyone involved, and appropriate for everyone involved to have guests and to talk with guests. So when that's in place, one of the more recent ones we did, I have up here, or we've done Malawi, Vietnam, but when that's in place, it can be really transformational. So once someone has actually seen in person what is happening and what their donation is doing, it's not just the gift that they make then, but it means that they're giving and they're committed for life. Like they're not going to stop, because now they know, now they've made a human connection, and they can see and imagine truly what it is that they're doing for people. So over the course of this program, we've seen, just as a direct result of visits, an additional $5 million from the people who visited. And depending when we take celebrities or other ambassadors, all kinds of media impressions, but I'm going to focus more just on the actual money. One example is that we did take a group of donors recently to Côte d'Ivoire, and I think before the person even came home from the trip, he had already committed $100,000. And I'm not sure he was even sure exactly how that was going to go. He was just so inspired by what he saw. And he was hosted by my colleague who's on the phone, Guillaume, in Côte d'Ivoire. So impressed by the team and the staff and the impact that he was seeing in the cocoa sector work, which is what he saw, and the village savings and loan associations that he was able to meet with, that he made a commitment on the spot. And we see that happen quite a lot. So that's a little more of a higher level of effort way to do it. And it's important when we use this sort of technique that we screen the people who are coming for capacity and for past giving and inclination. These aren't just people who would like to take a trip with CARE. These are people who are already very committed to community development or social impact. And we know, or they've maybe given to something similarly, we know that they're a good prospect. So that's that example. Oh, and I wanted to just give the context because what I do might be unfamiliar to some people on the call, which is working with individuals. Just at CARE, as an NGO, about $90 million annually is what we bring in from individuals who donate to CARE. And of that 90 million, $60 million is from high net worth individuals. So people, and this is what I'm saying, where this is the majority of the money, and these are often the people who contributed and committed to our Care Enterprises Impact Investment Fund were drawn exactly from this group of philanthropic supporters. So there can be certainly overlap in the type of person and partner that you're thinking about as we think about all these different ways that stakeholders can come together to fund either change in the sector or social impact in general. And the majority, for sure, for CARE, like the majority of the way we bring money in is from these high net worth individuals, at least when we're talking about individual supporters. CARE, of course, has institutional partners and foundations, a whole mix of different ways that we are funded, much like the work itself we're talking about. And we can go to the next one. So another thing I wanted to think about quickly for this presentation was, well, how can the cocoa sector leverage private individual supporters? It's not really a traditional way that maybe some companies would work, which makes sense. But one way that came to mind was the possibility of, when we're going into a partnership agreement or a contract with the private sector, sometimes it's possible to have a budget line even for communications, and that sort of tiny, it could be such a small percentage of the actual contract, but that budget money for telling the story via high quality video or photos and impact evaluation, all these different things that help people like me at CARE tell that story, makes it so much more likely that we can add additional funding to what's happening in that community and tell the story. So it could be a very modest investment that would have a huge ROI. It's incredibly important to raise community voices in all of that. It's a lot more, as I said, these people want to give to people and they want to understand who they're talking about, not exactly everyone around those people. The other thing I wanted to say was, it might be interesting just if folks in the cocoa sector are having these conversations with a large INGO like CARE, who has, works in 100 countries, reaches millions of people, there are always going to be people in that organization like me. And it might be worth it to just ask the question whether they have that department and whether there are individuals who might be interested in supplementing or co-investing or partnering in some way on the work that's being done. It's not always going to be true, but it absolutely could be true. And it's not a question that, I don't know if it's a question that folks think to ask, but I would say it's worth asking if we're trying to be creative about bringing additional funding into these community development projects. And I'll stop there, Yusuf. Thanks. Oh, Yusuf, you're on mute again.
Actually, thank you, Rachel. Actually, I got the idea of that session when I was invited to meet some of your CARE travelers 1.5 years ago, and the journey that you were mentioning. And this is what I thought to myself, wow, there's a totally unexplored landscape of the funding possibilities. So that may be interesting to give it a broader audience to get to know it better and see if this could work at a broader scale for the cocoa sector. So thank you to let us know that if individuals' social interests match with the social impact needs of the cocoa sector, there is something possible, provided in the current programs we have a small amount of budget for proper communication to trigger the process and then attract this potential of funding. This is what I can summarize from your helpful presentation. Now we have one last question to answer to before reaching the discussion part of our session. Is there also another way of innovatively leveraging massive funding from key stakeholders? And to answer to that question, we are welcoming someone who's in charge of identifying and driving value from investment education technology space. And she started her career in InnoCap Investment Management, which is a hedge funds managed account platform owned by BNP Paribas. So, we have a lot of former bankers here on this panel. So there's lots of money on the table. We hope that we could access some for our social impact we need to bring. BNP Paribas and National Bank of Canada at the time. She has also had experience across all the investment spectrum, from funds and value chains to being the transition for having been the transition CEO of a tech startup. And in addition to being a CFA charter holder, she holds a Master of Business Administration from the Shanghai Advanced Institute of Finance, where she wrote a thesis on impact investing. And she speaks 3 languages, French, English, Spanish, and she can even hold a conversation in Chinese Mandarin. Let us host the Deputy Country Director, Impact Finance Investment Manager of Trek Jacobs Foundation Côte d'Ivoire, Liz Birikundavi. You have the floor.
Thank you, Yusuf, for this nice introduction, and hi, everyone. I'm going to talk about our impact finance strategy at the Jacobs Foundation and try to answer that question at the same time, Yusuf. Just to give a bit of background and context for anybody who doesn't really know us, the Jacobs Foundation is a Swiss foundation that's focusing on education and early childhood development. It's based in Zurich, and in 2015, it decided to create an entity in Côte d'Ivoire. The whole, I guess, idea behind the creation of TREC as the international arm of the foundation was a bit of a test to see if the foundation was to focus all of its energy into one single geography when we're talking about international program, could it have an impact, a significant systemic impact on the education system? And that's why TREC was created. Sorry. So we have, so we're working on several fronts, very close collaboration with the Ministry of Education. We work with a lot of WCF partners with the cocoa industry, and we use several tools to do so. And one of these tools is impact finance. In almost everything that we do at TREC or at the foundation, we aim to do it in collaboration with key stakeholders and to ensure that we are going in the right direction. We ask those questions in order to have an understanding of what is needed. We don't want to be working in silos, so we want to basically build things with others, and we also want to work on social impact in a sustainable way. So as you can see here, with impact finance that is being used as a tool to support the TREC program, our objective was to basically transform or make Côte d'Ivoire emerge as a hub for education enterprises that offer goods and services in the education space. So we believe that investing in private actors working in communities where we are aiming to see that social impact is going to create a degree of resilience that could not necessarily have been occurring through a standalone project. Since the beginning of our impact finance activities, we have committed 4.3 million Swiss francs. We've invested directly in 6 different entities. Maybe we can look at the next slide to give a bit more details on the tools that we've been using. We've mainly used private sector instruments, equity, hybrid instruments, loans. Our portfolio itself is quite young because we actually started investing in 2017, so about 37 months. But I think we've been quite intentional, quite active, and we've been able to leverage a lot of the resources that exist in the market. So we have 6 direct investees, but if we look at indirect investees, we have invested in 16 entities. Most of them being African entrepreneurs, and I believe that it's extremely important when we're talking about community-driven development. So we need to make sure that we are creating, that we are supporting entities that are on the ground and that will stay on the ground for a long time, and that also are creating role models for the society. We have also invested in capacity building projects. As an investor and as a partner for growth, with these entities, our real value add as a foundation, because we are focused in education and early childhood development, we believe that we can help from a quality of education perspective. So our goal is to choose those champions that are already doing the right things, that have the right values, but also work with them and help them improve from that perspective so that the learning outcomes can just be optimized and maximized. So we've been working on different projects from that perspective. We can go on the next slide. I thought it would be interesting to look quickly at our achievements, but maybe with a focus on the leverage we've been able to achieve and how we've been able to do it. So since we started investing, when I mentioned earlier that we have 16 investees in our portfolio, we've been able to achieve that through the partnership of funds. We've done some direct investment, but we've done also some indirect investments. And that has allowed us to increase our reach. For example, with Investisseurs et Partenaires, we have co-created a fund that's called the Education Impact Fund, through which they have invested in 6 local entities. And that came also with a lot of hands-on help in terms of just formalizing like contractual employment, in terms of helping cleaning up accounting, in terms of helping also streamlining the marketing strategy of those education ventures. Often what we have is that we have very talented educators who want to do a change, but they're less of a business person per se. So we have this local fund manager who's there to help them strengthen their business, which is going to eventually also help them attract additional capital from other private investors. The other, I guess, impact that we're seeing also from like a sustainable perspective is that we have this, it's a first-time fund manager on the ground that potentially did not necessarily look at education as one of its core sector, but we're hoping that through this, the managing our asset and having this partnership with us, that this is going to stay a key sector in which they're going to be investing in their own funds in the future. And we're already seeing that because in one of the investees in which we have invested, they have co-invested with us with another fund, and they will do so with another one of these investees. So this to us is success. Every time we see leverage and additional partnership with key actors in the community, we believe that we're going to leave the place, the country in a better state than how it was when we came in. And that's really the goal in using private sector instruments. So we also have invested in the fund of Blue Orchard, REFA, that was described earlier by Patrick. We thought that was a very interesting structure. We have partnered, or we have leveraged the work with other key stakeholders. For example, one of the reasons or one of the ways one of our investees was able to reach as many students on their learning platform was through some sort of informal partnership with the government and the Ministry of Education, where they liked what this investee was doing, and they also provided a visibility on that platform. We worked as well with a lot of actors in the cocoa communities, some companies who use the services of our investees. For example, we know that one of the major chocolate companies sponsored the education of children that were at risk of child labor, so that they can use this platform to help them practice more. It really does provide some sort of tailored education value, and so that will prevent these children from dropping out of school. And this is basically a win-win. So you are supporting a business that is local, you're keeping children at home, you're potentially also reducing child labor. So that was the whole, I guess, vision with this partnership. We have another actor in the cocoa community who has hired another one of our investees to train its staff, because they have a technology that works offline, therefore very well in rural areas of Côte d'Ivoire, to train its staff on child safeguarding, which is extremely important. As you are increasing your reach and your activities, you want to make sure that you don't have this, it's both a reputational risk, but as well an actual risk for the children, and you want to make sure everybody's at the same level of understanding. With that platform, not only is the staff receiving information, but there's this continuous training pattern. You can also see who's accessing it, how well they're doing on the questions, and see where do you need to basically make more efforts so that everyone is at the same level of understanding. Another way we've leveraged investment, because is through co-investment. We've invested in a tech startup, and when we entered for its Series A, we also attracted 2 additional investors coming with us. The reason why they came is that they saw the value add of the Jacobs Foundation in terms of education. So it increased the confidence that this startup will do well. So we came in with even more capital than what we initially put in. For another company, our follow-on capital was basically a multiple. So we said to any other investors that we would come in to provide follow-on capital, but we had no amount. We said we would put 1.5 times what anybody's putting on the platform. So this basically encouraged others to sort of say, okay, let's put money, because we're seeing that, you know, there's going to be a multiplier effect there. So we're always trying to make sure that we're never going alone, that we have aligned incentive with our partners. And so far, I think we've created massive impact, and our portfolio company is doing well. In such a short amount of time, we already had one successful exit, an entrepreneur in Côte d'Ivoire who is an amazing woman who's been there for quite a while, but this additional funding has helped her streamline her strategy, has helped her expand to another country. Now she's also in Benin, and has also helped her just gain more visibility and close a contract with the government of Côte d'Ivoire. And that was not necessarily direct intervention from us, it was really from her. And she's a person that has really education, and especially education in rural area, at the center of her heart. So we know the values are extremely aligned. And that's the best example for us of empowering somebody who is there for the right reasons. And we know that although right now she has reimbursed her loan and bought back the shares because she's been doing so well, that she's going to keep growing, and that her impact is going to keep growing with her. And we can also show other investors who are, because we all know that Francophone Africa has a little bit less access to capital than Anglophone Africa. This shows to additional investors that it's worth it to take that risk in Francophone Africa, because you can find very good entrepreneurs, and you can also exit from those entrepreneurs. So we're really excited of the work that we're doing so far, and want to continue doing it. We want to keep bringing that value added from the scientific side, from the quality of education side. So we are working right now on a second fund that we're building around the concept of scientific capital, where we're trying to make sure that we will help all the investees company show scientifically that they are building the outcomes that they are saying that they are building. So really pushing on this core ability of ours from the education side, and making sure that with the high number of education technologies that we're seeing on the market right now, that both schools and individuals will know what to choose, because they will know that there is this measure of a successful outcome that is there and standardized with education technology companies. I hope that was quite clear, and I'm happy to answer further questions if there are any. I'm going to stop here.
Thank you so much, Liz. Seeing an organization that is putting all its leveraging power, using all these sophisticated financial arrangements, and attracting investors and supporting entrepreneurs, and also reinforcing local relays to really amplify the impact. And all this focused on a critical development and social impact catalyst that education is. That was an amazing presentation from me from that perspective. So thank you for sharing your experience at Trek Jacobs Foundation on that. Having said that, we are now reaching the interactive part of our session. So we have a couple of questions that has emerged from our chat box. So I'm going to share them, first of all, with Patrick. The question is that, from what you have described, do you see a role for the government, especially in the developed countries, for the type of models that you have described? And what do you think is needed from a policy environment perspective to have this model thriving and have a greater impact that we are seeking?
Yusuf, I lost you for a second. The role of the governments where in?
Yes, what could be the role of the government in the model that we have described and presented? And what do you think is needed from a policy environment perspective for this kind of model to grow and really thrive and attract fundings to meet the needs that have considerably increased?
It's an excellent question. I'm just thinking. Probably there are two things I would like to say, and then maybe my colleagues can also complement. I think whenever we speak about impact investment or innovative finance mechanism, I think they are just a tool, a mean to an end. So it's not a silver bullet, but it should help realize specific outcomes. I think the agenda should be set by the government and the local stakeholder and the local civil society. So I see finance as a tool that needs to fit into a somehow locally driven agenda where the government plays an important role, but not only, obviously also the civil society. The second thing is when you look at investments, I mean, investors want to deploy their money in places and in sectors where they feel comfortable enough, then they will be able to get the money back. So in some cases, they will look for higher returns. In some cases, they will look for less returns, especially if they are going for the impact component. They are in many cases willing to compromise on the financial return side, but they would want to invest in places, in countries where there is a certain stability, political stability, macroeconomic stability, rule of law, good governance, and where they know, enterprises can actually do what they're supposed to do. So, develop and sell products and services, and they can grow so that this gives a certain comfort to investors.
Yeah, that is pretty clear. Yes, yes. Have it aligned on the government agenda, but also have a clear and effective government with good governance in place and the required stability. So that is pretty clear as an answer to that question. The following question is for Rachel. Someone was particularly interested in how it works practically. The question is, how do you profile the people that you think would be good individual donors? Do they come to you? Do you come to them? How do we identify people that are more likely to invest, and you start them to work them out until they decide to invest and advance the social impact that we are all seeking?
Sure, that's a great question, and thank you for the question. So when we talk about the people who are making these larger investments in these projects, the questioner has some sense of the fact that they're not new to CARE or new to CARE's work in most cases. So remember how I talked about most of the money that we bring in from individuals is from these high net worth individuals. Many of them began their journey with our organization and with others, giving small, modest amounts, 25, 100, etc. And over the course of their financial lifetime and their relationship with CARE, they give more. And that's partly an effort on the part of CARE. We have people who work with the folks at that level who are doing more online campaigns and mail campaigns. And then once somebody is identified as having some capacity and more interest in CARE, then someone like me is assigned. Just like, honestly, just like you would see at a firm where people have accounts that they manage, there's a portfolio of people, accounts that I manage, who are family foundations, who are individuals. And in addition to the information we gather ourselves over time, there are actually even sometimes when we're thinking we would like more to expand the number of people, more prospects, we do that in a number of ways. Sometimes through the relationships of our board members, through the relationships of the donors themselves, and also through screenings. There are companies in the United States, quite frankly, who do things called a wealth screening, and they can look through our entire database of donors to see if there are people who are giving at a certain level, but who actually have indicators that would say they could give a lot more. Maybe they've made a gift publicly to a different charity. Maybe they have assets, publicly available assets, and they're because the industry of philanthropy in the United States is so large. There are a lot of different players who have a stake in the way that they're worked with. It's a very large part of life for a lot of Americans for various reasons. But so that, I don't know if that answers the question, but it's a market effort from an actual staff perspective of what I actually do. And they're not new. I have people. And then part of what I also do would be to bring in new people, whether through my personal research, through the relationships of the donors, and then through the relationships of different stakeholders, which is why I'm so glad to be here to kind of present that idea that, like what we're all saying, there's no way that this SDGs are going to be achieved through personal philanthropy alone or private. The donations being made at a global level, I think, are in the hundreds of millions, and we need trillions to achieve the SDGs. So it takes all of the different ways that the people on this panel are talking about and the individual's generosity. And I think even the donors themselves are starting to see that, which is why some are crossing over into giving, say, to investing in an impact fund or something like that, and donating their money to something like CARE. Does that answer the question?
Yep. Yes, totally. Thank you. There are two short questions for Edgar. The first one is that while describing the process and the type of impact that you are seeking, you said we would want to see the impact within 5 years. So is it contradictory to the normal practice? Isn't 5 years too short to consider to talk about impact? That is the first question. And the second one that we got is that, do you have some examples of intervention models that are being considered as part of the exercise that you have just described?
Thank you, Yusuf. Very nice questions, because we put the fingers in the whole exercise that we are now conducting and that we are really carrying out. So when we mean achieving impact in a time frame of 5 years, this is what responds to maybe the demand from the private investors. So what I'm saying is that private investors, in order to put their capital, they may not wait that long. So this puts us in a very complicated situation. And that's why I was saying that the whole exercise, it is to identify the best intervention that fits under this specific financing mechanism. So of course, we believe that interventions may have impact in a long-term perspective, but when talking about these impact bonds, they may have these limitations. And that's why very interesting and relevant interventions were kicked out of this initial list. So I would like to really stress out this point. And when we are talking about the best interventions for us, is the best fit for the financing mechanism or this specific financing mechanism. So then examples of the short list that we are now, we came out with, yes, I may say that we are looking at for example, school feeding programs that can be interesting to explore. We are also looking at quality of education, and to be honest, it's been quite difficult to identify the right intervention for this. But where we are now, it's like we have this short list, which includes, like the one we are having now is even we consider access to basic services like water or electricity. Unfortunately, they were kind of somehow kicked out of the list because of the time they need to prove their impact. So I think that's quite interesting to keep in mind. Thanks.
Yeah, so it's really important that there is a strong connection of workability between the type of intervention that we are going for and the type of financial instrument that we are attracting from to realize. This is what I understand from the different explanations shared so far. So it may be seen as kind of limitation of the span of intervention that we can do, but any new thing comes with its limitation, and it's good to be aware of the potential limitations of these new instruments also. Before I turn to Liz for a question for her, there's a thinking that has been shared also in the chat box about all these instruments that are new and that represent a new territory to be explored. They are seen as a potential a solution for especially the local NGOs that are struggling for the financial viability. And it may be an interesting way to explore for these local NGOs to kind of try to reinforce the financial viability and the access to finance and beyond the classic model that they have been using so far. And the question for Liz is that this is a purely contextual question. How are you working with the cocoa sector and the governments to meet the huge funding needs of education as part of the fight against child labor in this past and coming month, so concretely speaking?
Thank you for that question. And this would be, I guess, less on the side of impact finance, but more on the side of our other nonprofits activities. So we've been piloting, like since 2015, we've been piloting models with the cocoa community. So our objective has been to support the CSR initiatives and help them implement models that had been scientifically proven from an education outcome perspective. So we've been working with we've been working with 12 companies in different regions of the cocoa sector in Côte d'Ivoire. And the models that we found have been the most successful are ones that we are aiming to scale amongst the communities of those cocoa companies, but also nationwide. So one of the things that for us was extremely important when we entered Côte d'Ivoire was to enter the country and do activities with in collaboration with the Ministry of Education. So any education model that was piloted was presented to the Ministry of Education for them to look at them and follow the progress and see if there were components of those models that they would want to incorporate in the national education system. That was extremely important for us. And since last year, we've been working with the government in looking at, within their efforts to eradicate child labor, they're looking at the root causes. And one of the causes of that unfortunate phenomenon is education, like lack of education opportunities, lack of quality of education, lack of access to education. And from that perspective, we are working with the cocoa industry and with the government to create a PPP where that is called CLE, where we would scale some of the learnings, some of those models, where we would also incorporate some of the key elements that the cocoa sector wants to see. There's also research that's going to be also brought in there, M&E components, technology. We really want to make sure that we are working hand in hand with all the actors of the ecosystem to really move forward and put an end or significantly decrease the issue that we're seeing right now. So that's in the work. We've been working very hard with the cocoa industry and with the government to make this happen. If we are looking more at what we're doing in impact finance, like I was saying a bit before, some of our investee companies are really focused at increasing quality of education and giving access to quality education to children who normally don't have access to it. So we have, for example, one of our edtech companies that has digitalized content of the Ministry of Education that is accessible by SMS. So for a very small fee, children have access to unlimited content of that they should be reviewing and at their school level. Let's say they have access to quizzes, preparation from exams, and they can even send messages to teachers when they have questions. The teachers that are hired by the company, and this basically solves two different issues. One is that we know that in rural areas classes are overcrowded often, and the teachers unfortunately don't necessarily have the time to follow the progress of each children individually. So by having this opportunity to have access to the material, answer those quizzes, children can advance at their own pace and make sure that they really incorporate the learnings, especially when sometimes some of the children, they should have access to material, but the reality is that some of them don't have access to material. And from that perspective, you know, some actors in the cocoa industry have also took advantage of those services and sponsored the children that they thought were most at risk of child labor, so they could use that platform, be better successful at school, and not drop off, because whenever they're dropping off from school, their parents will potentially bring them to the field with them. So that's what we are doing to help from that issue, on that issue.
Thanks so much. And now we're reaching the point where we're gonna do a bit of polling to explore your thinking after having heard all this. But before that, I would need you to turn your camera on, everyone, and put your best smile for a quick picture of our session that we'll be sharing with you, and also for the records of the partnership meeting, please. Okay.
Got it, Yusuf.
Yep. Could we have and Nene Fofana and Billy, please? And Daniel, tell us it's done. It's okay.
All right, we're all good.
Okay. Oh, no, you have to do it again because
okay,
yes.
No problem.
Yes, we have my dearest Auntie Ya, so we cannot have a picture without Auntie Ya. So do it again, please.
Okay, I think we got everybody.
So great, thank you everyone. So this is time for polling now. We have 3 small questions for you. And Priska, if you are ready, let me know. Just by, okay. So Priska will be sharing the link to the poll in the chat box. You just need to click on the link and you will access the form and just fill it and press send. So the first question is quite simple, straightforward. How would you rate the funding availability for an increased social impact from community-driven? First option, community-driven development is funded. Second option, there is a small funding gap. Third option, there is a huge funding gap. This is our first polling, so please click on the form, fill the form and send it. And so Priska, we are expecting up to 10 or 11 voters on this. And if we include, I think it could be more, we should include the speakers also because they have their own experience of this. So speakers are also encouraged to fill the form, please. I can see how Liz is serious filling the form. Priska, what's the participation rate? Please unmute yourself.
Nothing yet. Still waiting some
Nothing
responses.
Yet. Okay,
yes.
Let us be a little bit more patient about that.
I was actually writing to ask your questions, but I don't think it's the right link. At least I don't see a way of answering the questions. Maybe I'm the only one.
Yeah, I think it might be the response link, Priska.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, Priska, maybe you put the wrong link, please. We're sorry for that. We're gonna put the right link.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, let us try that one. I'll try also to ensure that
yes,
it's
that one would be better.
Yes, that's the good one, please. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how is it going, Priska?
5 responses.
We need at least 10 to have something that we can discuss a bit And now, still 5.
It's 8.
2 more. And we'll be
9.
result. It's only 1.
Ten.
Yes. Okay, let us consider to share the result now. Priska, have the floor. Okay, so this is what I was expecting. Everyone is aware that there is a huge funding gap. So there is no surprise here. So there is an urgent necessity to act to address this. So let us move to the next question. So please copy paste the second link. The question is, we just want to have your top 3 pick for this question. So you are allowed to 3 answers. You can tick 3 boxes for that question. Which 3 social impact topics face the most serious funding challenges in the cocoa sector from your experience and from what we have heard so far? 1, child labor prevention and remediation. 2, women's empowerment. 3, community economic empowerment, including DSLAs. 4, child survival. 5, education. 6, other, and specify if this is something completely different from what has been enumerated here.
Mine says I don't have permission to view the form.
Please.
Same for me.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, the link doesn't work to me too.
Oh, the link works for me. So please try again. Because I tried.
Please, the link is not working for me.
Might just be working for staff, Yusuf.
Yes, please delete it and paste it again.
Okay.
I don't know, for any reason it worked for me and did not work for our participants. Sorry about that. Is it the repost that I can see here, Priska?
Yes.
Yes, it works. Does it work this time, please?
Not for me. I think there's a right issue. I don't know if we have the right to actually look at the form.
Oh.
The message is saying you are not authorized to access.
Okay, let me.
Yeah. Okay, so be coming back to that while Priska is fixing this. Danielle, please, can you help me in thanking our sponsors and sharing the next step with our participant before we come back to this?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you all again for joining us for today's session. I learned a lot from each of our speakers, and I think you all did a great job of tying everything together. We'd just like to shout out one more time our sponsors for this year's partnership meeting, particularly our gold level sponsor, our friends from Mondelez. And in terms of what's next, the partnership meeting is coming to an end, but there's still some opportunities to network using the Pathable platform. You can review any of the recorded sessions that are available on the platform, and you can share your thoughts under the Conversations tab on Pathable or on social media using the hashtag WCFPM and tagging all of our @WorldCocoa accounts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. So what it means is that all this platform that you have been using since yesterday will remain for a few weeks, so you can still network with all the people you are interested in talking with. You can also view the videos of the sessions, the one you have participated in and the ones you could not participate in, and you can also share your thoughts. So this all this ecosystem will remain for a couple of weeks so that the interaction experience between all the practitioners and the experts and the people of the cocoa sector and the partners can continue over and over. Okay, so Priska, is it okay now on your side?
Yes, we received so far 8 responses.
Oh, which is great. So let us see how it looks like then. Can you share the results, please? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the winner is women's empowerment.
Oh.
No, not the definitive results yet. Okay, women's empowerment, child labor prevention and remediation, and community economic empowerment. So this is the top 3 of our panel, of our session here: women's empowerment, child labor prevention and remediation, and community economic empowerment. And so this is where we think the most urgent needs are for funding, and this is where we need to really invest. And the last question now, it is also a sample question. We need to also have your top 3 responses here. If I do not mess, correct me if I'm wrong, Priska.
Yes, true.
Yes. Where do you see the greatest need for improvement within existing social development funding models? 1, identifying new partnerships with government, private investor, impact investors, donors, etc. 2, better leveraging existing partnerships. 3, finding a high return on social development investment. 4, securing longer-term funding. And 5, other, specified in that case. Is the link working for everyone? Yes, working for me, yes. Priska?
7, 8, 9, 8, 10. Can I start?
10. Yes, you can start. Priska is our privileged election management body. She sees the results before everyone.
Okay.
Okay. I think here the top 3 is securing longer term funding.
Yeah.
And then we have identifying new partnerships, and then finding a high return on social development investments. So this is how we can attract more funding, and this is how we can meet the needs that we have presented so far. So, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure to have this financing journey with all of you, benefit from the experience of our expert and panelists. We have learned a lot, and we hope that it's the same on your side. We hope that the conversation will go on through the partnership meeting infrastructure and ecosystem that will remain, but also through emails and individual communication. It has been really really happy to say thank you, a big thank you to all of you for your patience with our technical issues also. And thank you also to my supporting team. And let us keep in touch, because it's just a stage on this long journey of founding social impact to achieve all the goals that we are pursuing in the sustainability of the cocoa sector. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Take good care. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Yusuf. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.